Hi everyone, I'm Heidi Hess. I'm the Senior Campaign Manager here at Credo. And I'm so happy that Scott Simpson and Naheed from Muslim Advocates are here with us today. They couldn't be here and Credo couldn't be working with them at a more important time. Donald Trump has proposed creating a registry of Muslims, and he has been relentless in his attempts to ban Muslims from the United States and to close our borders to refugees. He's filled his administration with anti-Muslim extremists, and his rhetoric has fueled a rise in hate crimes targeting Muslims and people perceived to be Muslim across the country. At Credo, we're committed to doing everything we can to block attempts by Trump or his extremist Republican Party to harass, demonize, or terrorize Muslims. And we reject any attempts to close our borders, to increase militarization in the Middle East, or to suspend civil rights. Muslim advocates are a key partner in that work. Last spring, we worked with them and other allies to successfully pressure corporations like Coca-Cola, Hewlett-Packard, Wells Fargo, UPS, and FedEx to refuse to legitimize Trump's hate by refusing to sponsor the Republican National Convention. After the election, we joined Muslim advocates in a campaign to convince the Obama administration to dismantle a Bush-era registry that targeted immigrants from Muslim-majority countries. And in December, we worked together to pressure tech companies like Apple, Google, Facebook, and Microsoft to pledge not to build a Muslim registry for Trump. Most recently, we've been working together to pressure CEOs like Disney's Bob Iger to refuse to serve on Trump's business councils. These campaigns are only a small part of what Muslim Advocates does. They also are fierce defenders of Muslims' rights in the courts, including most recently Trump's Muslim bans. They work to challenge bigotry and hate crimes and to make sure they're not swept under the rug. And they also work to make sure that Muslims are aware of their legal rights and can connect with resources to defend themselves and their communities. So now I'll turn it over to Scott to tell you a little bit more about what they do.
Thank you, Heidi.
Thank you.
Heidi is remarkable. Credo, we are so thankful to be partners with you. My name is Scott Simpson. I am the Public Advocacy Director for Muslim Advocates. And that introduction was better to our work than anything I could have ever come up with. So I'm going to take your piece of paper. Hopefully you can have that. Our work has never been more important than it has been right now. President Trump rode a tidal wave of bigotry, particularly against Muslims, into the White House. He promised time and time and time again that he was just going to outright ban Muslims from entering the country. And on January 27th, at 4:39 p.m. Eastern Time, he followed through on his promise. Now, when this was signed, immediately Muslims were being stopped at the airport, they were being searched, they were asked to sign their rights away, many of them were turned around and told to go home. And what wound up happening organically after that was absolutely remarkable and almost impossible to plan for. Within hours, airports across the country looked like that. There were thousands. This is a major airport on a coast, right? But this wasn't just in San Francisco and New York. In Bloomington, Indiana, in Grand Rapids, Michigan, in Boise, Idaho, these are places where people were coming together to stop the Muslim ban. And it wasn't just Muslims either. I mean, these were people from all walks of life coming together, every race, every faith. These are folks that were all represented. And if you're a student of history at all, you can take a look at how social movements work. And one of the things that many of them have in common is a defining, organizing moment. A moment that can define that movement for generations to come. And we know a lot of them by name, right? For the LGBT movement, we have Stonewall, right? For voting rights, we have Selma. For the labor movement, we have Haymarket Square. The peace movement had Kent State. Black Lives Matter has Ferguson, right? For American Muslims, this was that historic moment. Now, amidst all this, I wasn't working at Muslim Advocates. But I got a phone call from a woman named Naheed. And Naheed is a very formidable woman. She's with me here today. And I can't wait to introduce you to her in person. She's eventually going to stand up and do some Q&A with me. But she's a very formidable woman. She has to be. She is one of the co-founding members of Muslim Advocates. And we've been around for 8 or 9 years, defending American Muslims in the courts, in the court of public opinion, well before Trump started this campaign. Now, she called me up, and I had my dream job at the moment. I worked at another civil rights group. I was a campaign director, and I was very happy. And I was engaged on this in a personal level. I went to the White House that weekend. That's where I was protesting. But she told me that Muslim Advocates is growing to meet the demand, and that we're doing big things, and that we can't do it alone. And she's right. American Muslims are 1 to 2% of the U.S. population, and they are used to fighting. Muslims know how to advocate. They've been doing it for a very long time. But no community can do this on their own. We need coalitions, we need alliances, just like the type that we have with Credo. Now, when she asked me to join Muslim Advocates, this gentleman's voice started ringing in my ear. That's my stepfather, Joe. Very private guy, all right? I actually needed his permission to talk about him here today. He just wants to live a prosperous, quiet life. He loves classic rock music. He loves his dog, Benny. He's been married for 20 years. He's an accountant, right? This is not someone who loves the spotlight. But Joe is not his birth name. Joe's birth name is Yusuf. And Joe's a Muslim. He's also an immigrant from the Middle East. Now, when I came out of the closet at 16, Joe was nothing but supportive for me. Nothing but supportive. So was the rest of my family. But this was also in the year 2000, all right? This is when being gay was still illegal in 16 states, right? This is before the Supreme Court said that that wasn't okay. And I personally felt vulnerable. I felt vulnerable to go out and be clocked as gay. I was harassed in school. This is a common story, right? I was harassed in school. I felt intimidated. So I tried to play it straight with varying degrees of success. That's my homecoming date, Jill. I did not get Jill's permission to say this way. But Jill, if you're in Facebook Live, we thank you for all of your support over the years. But he was supportive of me in this time, right? And 9/11 happened a year later. In fact, he was so supportive. This was him giving a toast at my wedding. That's my stepdad. He's a good guy. And 9/11 happened a year later, after I came out. And Joe's life pattern started to change in a way that I noticed that started to resonate with me. In the same way I was afraid to come out, so was he. He would always think twice about telling someone his birth name, or why he wasn't eating during Ramadan, or where he was eating from. And that's wrong. Like, that's just wrong. It should be wrong to any American to really understand that who you are is protected. Right? You should be able to walk into any place with the confidence of knowing that you're safe and that you're protected by the laws of the land. And he was very nervous back in 9/11, and now he's also really nervous today. Now, he has good reason to be. Because this tidal wave of bigotry that President Trump was riding also led to some serious anti-Muslim sentiment happening across the nation. Politicians have been exploiting and amplifying bigotry at all levels of government, and the Muslim ban is the biggest example, but it is not the only one. Mosques are burning. Hate crimes have risen 67%. The number of anti-Muslim hate groups has tripled since the election. And this is just a part of it. This type of vandalism, there's an epidemic of this happening in mosques across the country. Muslims go home. And when our president tries to criminalize a religion, that's something that I instinctively know is wrong. I've been criminalized, right? And African Americans are criminalized, immigrants are criminalized, transgender folks are criminalized. Muslims are absolutely being criminalized. But if we all don't come together, whether we're Muslim or not, to help fight this, we're not going to get anywhere, and we're all going to lose. All this is really scary, by the way. It's a lot scarier for the target. This gentleman was in a bar in Kansas a few weeks back, hanging out with his friend. And a gentleman who never met him before runs into a bar, yells, "Get out of my country," shoots him. One person died, 2 were injured. This is a scary life to lead. And he didn't do anything. He just was enjoying his day out. And that guy wasn't a Muslim, by the way. This gentleman was not a Muslim. He just looked Muslim enough, right? And that's one of the key psychological factors I want us to consider when we're talking about anti-Muslim bigotry, is that most Americans have never met a Muslim. Surveys have shown this, all right? Or they don't think they've met a Muslim. And they don't really understand what Islam is when they talk about bigotry, when they talk about hate and fear. They think of Muslim as someone who's just kind of brown, right? The kind of brown that lives in this sector that's like 30% of the world, or 40% of the world, right? And in some ways, it's even worse than that. Does anyone remember this? A third of Americans think that President Obama is a Muslim. And to be clear, he's not. President Obama is a Christian. And the fact that I need to delineate his religion as not Muslim is a strange thing to have to do. And it's even worse. It's even worse because Republicans said that by 43%. Now, what does that mean? What if Muslim isn't a religion and it's not a race to people? What if it's just a slur for people that you disagree with? That's extra frightening, and that's frightening for the entire prospect of our country. We need to change this narrative. When Muslims can just be a repository for hate, for fear, and generalized disapproval, that's a dangerous place for a community to be. Now, the person who's made an art form out of exploiting this bigotry is in the White House. And he's being advised by some of these gentlemen right here. Now, you might not know who they are, but they're evil. Let me tell you this. And they're in the White House, and they're running things. These are folks that are associated with hate groups overtly. In fact, one of the leaders of the nation's largest anti-Muslim hate groups is meeting in the White House today. They're even associated with former Nazi collaborators. That's who's in the White House, all right? And these are just the big names. If we scratch the surface, we're likely to find people at all levels of the federal government that share these points of view. This is not a one-off. The Muslim ban was not one thing, right? This is a deeply committed ideology of hate that is a central organizing principle of this White House. And in fact, this White House has become the de facto organizing center place for the nation's anti-Semites, its anti-Muslim bigots, and its racists. It's not out in the country somewhere anymore. It's in the White House. But we have something much bigger. It's one of the reasons that I'm so proud to be working with Muslim advocates. We have the Constitution. And it turns out the Constitution says you have the right to be a Muslim. And we're finding this out every single day a little bit more. We won. We won. We won not just once, we won twice. And our track record of beating this president is really good so far. All right? This doesn't just happen. You can't just come after a religious minority because our founding document says you can't. Thomas Jefferson says you can't. That's not me talking. That's centuries of jurisprudence. Right? That's the founding document of this nation. That is a powerful thing. And we have it on our side. We want to use this as a model, by the way. This is the type of model that we want other communities to be able to see. Because Trump isn't just coming after Muslims, he's coming after all of them. So how do we take these wins, right? And how do we extrapolate them on a further basis? Furthermore, how do we keep them going? We got 4 more years of this, right? So we need support. We need alliance building. And we need to be smart. This is a smart person. This is Farhana Kira. She's the CEO of Muslim Advocates. She's my other boss. She was a founding member of this organization. She's the one who's leading us. We're expanding our campaign team to talk about how to change the public perception of Muslims, how to make sure they can't be used as a tool and exploited for fear and resentment in the country. We're also expanding our legal and policy teams to make sure that the courts will stay on our side. This doesn't just happen nationally. This is happening in communities. This is local. So it happens in places like Kansas. It's also happening in a place called Culpeper, Virginia. Now, Culpeper is about a 2 hours drive from DC. All right, and the DC metro area is growing quite a bit. What was once a very rural community is growing. All right, it's becoming more expensive. It's becoming more suburban. It's becoming more diverse. This house is on a used car dealership in Culpeper. It's worn down. It's unheated. It has one habitable room. This is the Islamic Center of Culpeper. 15 families worship there. Now, I've been inside. The inside is impeccably maintained. It's filled with love. They've done everything they can to make this a space that's a safe space to worship. And these are the members of the Islamic Center of Culpeper. That's Dr. Nabil. Dr. Nabil invited me in a couple weeks back, and some of my colleagues at Muslim Advocates. We sat in the back, gave us pizza while they worshiped, and he was giving his talk right before the Friday prayers. And his speech was about how thankful they are to be in a country like the United States, where religious liberty is respected and where they're allowed to openly and freely practice their faith. That's what Dr. Nabil was preaching. But the county of Culpeper is not holding up this end of the deal. You see, this community pulled their resources last year. They bought an acre of land down the road because they wanted to build a mosque that's purpose-built for them. They have a growing congregation. The real estate's getting more expensive. It's time for them to do this. And so they applied for a routine permit. I think you probably already know where this is going. This is a routine sewage permit that every building in the county has to have. And in 25 years, this routine sewage permit has not been denied to any house of worship, ever. They've never denied any house of worship this permit until the Islamic Center applied for one. In 25 years, they never even held a public hearing on this permit until the Islamic Center applied for one. And at the public hearing, lots of comments, lots of people packing the room. How many of the comments do you think were about sewage? There weren't. The comments were about Muslims. Now, I'm not a religious person, but I know what bigotry looks like. And you don't need to be a religious person to see it. I know that in this country, you have the right to be a religious person that goes to a mosque. You have the right to be a non-religious Muslim who doesn't go to a mosque. You have the right to be a Jew or a Christian or an atheist or secular or whatever you would like to be in your religion. That's the right. And Culpeper County is denying it. The vote was close. It was close. But they denied this permit. Now, because the law is on our side, the Obama Justice Department decided to step in. And they said, you know what? This is also last year. They said, you know what? We're going to file a lawsuit. This is against the law. This violates the religious liberty of this community, and we have a national stake in this. They weren't representing the congregation. They were representing the Justice Department. It's an important distinction to make for these purposes. And the county had to make a choice. All right? The Justice Department wants to file a lawsuit. You can do one of two things. You can settle, right? You can say, all right, we're going to work with the county. We're going to handle the sewage issue. We're going to let them build, as is their right. Or you can spend taxpayer dollars, hire an attorney, and fight. Culpeper decided to fight. And if I were a resident of Culpeper, if I were a member of this congregation, I would be even more disgusted. Because there are members of that congregation who've been there for 20 years, paying taxes to the county for 20 years, so that the roads can be paved and so the power lines can stay up. Never once did they consider that they would take the taxpayer dollars that they're giving to the county so that the county could turn around and pay a lawyer to fight their right to worship. So they called Muslim advocates. They said, we need a seat at this table too. We need to have a voice in this lawsuit. And a few weeks ago, Muslim advocates filed a lawsuit on their behalf. Now, this isn't just happening in Culpeper. This is happening across the country. There are liberal places like Bayonne, New Jersey, which is a suburb of New York. This is happening. In a suburb of Detroit, this is happening. In Fredericksburg, Virginia, this is happening. And along the way, Muslim advocates is there. We're continuing to file lawsuits on this issue, but not just that. It's important for Muslim advocates to be engaged because a community not only has the right, it has the desire to be at the table when decisions are being made about its rights. When I work with the Muslim community when I hear them referencing fights like this, they say that they happen about us but without us. And that often does a disservice to the community because this is not just about the micro issue at hand, right? The public narrative around Muslims is stuck in a frame around national security. It's not in this frame of, this is a community that just wants to worship, right? Or be regular, or participate equally in society. And Muslims need to be at the table when this is happening. So for someone like me, I have a stark choice to make. How could I say no? How could I not support an organization that is a part of that? We're not just doing mosques either. There's an era of expanded racial and religious profiling that we're in. We're doing Know Your Rights training. We're doing Know Your Rights materials. We're making sure people are armed with the information that they need to live day to day. We're working in coalition, groups like Credo, but also cross race, cross ethnicity, cross faith, in order to call for anti-Muslim officials. This is our friend Sebastian Gorka, the guy who's associated with Nazi collaborators. He doesn't belong in the White House. He should go. This is Jerry Falwell. Not a common face you see too much these days. The reason he's on the screen is because there's a tactic that is tried and true amongst people who want to oppress others. And I don't want to, you can overstate the similarity between social movements, so that's a really important thing to take note of, but there are themes that develop when folks want to oppress a community. One of those themes is that people in power are invested in creating fear of a community. All right? And Falwell was a master at creating fear out of the LGBT community. All right? This was a community that was told that my community was going to recruit your kids. You should be scared of those gays. You can't let them be teachers. Right? This is a community where when the people who are supposed to be my mentors, by the way, a whole generation of gay men who died of AIDS, right? This is a guy, and the quote, this quote just, it's bothersome. This is a guy that said, AIDS is the punishment for a society that tolerates homosexuals. Right? This was someone who was saying, be afraid that they're going to recruit your kids. Be afraid they're going to give you AIDS. And create a culture of fear around the LGBT community. Now, over time, and it was not a clean process, things happen. Social movements are messy, right? It takes everybody. Some themes started to appear in the gay rights space to counter this. One of them was that they took the narrative back. They said, no longer are we going to be in this defensive space. No longer are we going to have to defend ourselves for having HIV, right? No longer are we going to defend ourselves from this children recruitment nonsense, right? We're going to fight for things that change the narrative, that also expand our rights and privileges. We're going to fight to serve in the military, right? We're going to fight to get married and have kids and lead boring lives, right? Because those things matter too. And at the same time, we can also kind of set the stage for greater cultural acceptance. And that's happening to American Muslim as well. Talk a little bit about how American Muslims are referenced in the national security context as much, right? So when you read about any news story about Muslims, chances are it has something to do with terrorism. You know, when an attack happens and a Muslim happens to be one who commits it, if there's a shooting, the news coverage is massive. But when it's a non-Muslim, it's not nearly at scale. And we're stuck in this framework. And this framework actually undermines our ability to protect the most basic rights of American Muslims. So that's one of the reasons that fighting for religious liberty is important. It's one of the reasons that fighting hate crimes out in communities is important. Because not only does this help protect the community, it also changes the narrative. It takes it back in a way that's so powerful, it's so important. And it's the vision of where we're going as a movement. Now, this just made the news this weekend. Now, this is a well-established fact that if you are in a public school and you want to start a Christian club or a Jewish club or a Muslim club, off hours, you can do that. Privately, you're not subjecting other students, you're not preaching, you're just organizing your own religion, your own folks. That's okay. And in Texas, Christian clubs are a very popular thing. And a high school in Texas allows some Muslim students to take an empty classroom no one's using on a Friday and do some prayers. The Texas Attorney General just sent them a very intimidating, scary letter, essentially questioning them whether or not they're violating religious liberty. This is what discrimination looks like in communities. Addressing this type of bigotry head on is where we're going. We have to fight the battles on national security. We have to. That's what's at stake. But we also need to fight these battles in Texas and in Culpeper and in Bayonne, New Jersey, because we need to remind folks at every point that these Muslims aren't a security threat. They're people. They're Americans. They've been here since the beginning. The first Muslims came here on slave ships. So we're working in a coalition. Heidi talked about this campaign. We've been talking to CEOs of companies like Uber and Tesla and Disney with Credo, with other colleagues, to ask them to step down from Trump's Business Advisory Council. Right? Where we asked together with Coca-Cola and some other, FedEx, to stop subsidizing the RNC, which gives a platform for hate. This is encouraging because it's not just the Muslim community that's stepping up anymore. The Trump administration was a dark cloud. But the silver lining are alliances like what we have with Credo. And they give me hope. This is Shahir Mirza. He gives me hope too. He's a young Muslim teenager, and he gets bullied in school. And he didn't just take it. He actually went with Muslim advocates. We went to see Paul Ryan, Speaker Paul Ryan. He went all the way to Washington to tell Speaker Ryan about how the hostile anti-Muslim rhetoric of the campaign was impacting him in his day-to-day life. This kid's inspiring. I'm also inspired by people like Daniel from Ohio, who you don't know. That's okay. Daniel was concerned when he saw this rhetoric heating up on the campaign. And he Googled Muslim advocacy organizations. Muslim advocates came up. And he donated money to us. He had never given to a Muslim group before. But when he donated, he also included this note. It says, I just want Muslims to know that there are people in America who are their friends, and that we are in solidarity with them. People like Daniel give me hope. People like Credo Mobile subscribers, they give me hope. Because that is the future of how we all need to work. It's not even the future, it's the present. We need to do this work together. And so there's a lot more we can do together, though. So if you're out there on Facebook Live, you should like us. You should share this live stream. I think it'll rebroadcast. You should share this on your page. You should send it to your friends who care too. You could also take out your credit card and hit donate now And you can put $25 on there too. That's the support that we need to keep this going, because again, this is a marathon, this is not a sprint. We need to expand to meet this demand, and I don't know if we're ever going to do it. We're always going to have so much to do. But we're going to try the hardest that we possibly can. And thank you for your support. Thank you for allowing us to come here today. And thank you for being partners with Muslim Advocates. We greatly appreciate it. My colleague, Naheed Qureshi, she's going to join us. I know that there's some question and answer, and she's run things for a very long time, so we want to make sure that she's available. This is Naheed Qureshi, the Deputy Director of Muslim Advocates. And do we have questions?
Hi, yeah, I'm Josh. I'm a director here, and I have a question from Rebecca. She's a Credo member in St. Paul, Minnesota, and she asked, what are things non-Muslims can do to be allies of Muslims in our own communities?
The most straightforward, simple thing to do is to be informed. And it's to go and build bridges and make sure that it is known that you are an ally. At the Islamic Center in Culpeper, they have people who go out and support them. It's not like it's not like the county of Culpeper is everyone in the county is against them. They actually have people who go and support, and that's something that's in their community, that's immediate. There's no reason to not reach out and say hello. That's the most important part, because folks need support in their local communities. But then there's also getting hooked up with groups like Muslim Advocates at the local level. And you can do this online. We can all, look, we're also activists these days. We can always tweet and share and do those things. But in real communities, when people are being attacked, right? When people are being vandalized and mosques are being burned, to build local power, you also got to go offline. You got to shake hands. You got to say hello and be willing to do that. That's the number one thing that allies can do. And also step back a little bit too. You know, be a partner. Be a partner and let people speak for themselves, but be a strong ally to that. To me, that's so important.
Scott, I'll just quick
yeah.
add something. That's a great question and a really important question. Just in addition to what Scott said, I think, these issues are not, and something that we convey to people all the time, they're not Muslim issues. These issues are about who we are as Americans and our values. And so what we encourage people to do is, whether it's on a local level or on the national level, if you're going to meet with your congressman, if you're going to meet with your mayor, if you have a meeting with the new Attorney General Sessions and you're a civil rights advocate, when you have the opportunity to speak to these people, you bring up these issues. You say, what are you doing to speak up against the arson down the street? What are you doing to stop this Muslim ban? We don't support this. It shouldn't just be, and we are so lucky that through our partnerships with Credo and Color of Change and Move On and so many other, organizations that have stepped up over the last, quite frankly, at this point, we're at 15 years. I mean, certainly we're feeling an intense emergency now, but we are at 15 years. And the difference between what happened after 9/11 and what's happening now is the level of solidarity. And that is making all the difference. You couldn't see what happened in the airports 14 years ago when NSEERS was happening, when the special registration was happening. There was a peep of response from non-Muslim organizations. And so things have really changed dramatically in terms of how the public's tolerance for this, and also the solidarity and education that's occurred with non-community-based organizations. And those partnerships are invaluable, and we couldn't do our work without folks on your team and in other organizations as well. And we learn from you. Heidi and Rashad are some of my biggest teachers on how to organize campaigning that we never dreamed we'd have to do 10 years ago or 5 years ago. And so what I would just say is that this has to be part of our agenda as activists and advocates, regardless of what your agenda is when you go into this meeting. You should walk in with a question about what is happening to your fellow Americans.
Lonnie, I'm Mrs. Samuel here. What can we as consumers do to help hold corporations accountable for their collaboration with Trump?
We've seen some really strong campaigns. Credo has been a part of them, so thank you for asking that particular question. To make sure that that there are companies who are currently on Trump's, the shorthand for it is the Business Advisory Council, right? These are folks who are tacitly endorsing the Trump agenda because they're a part of it. They say that they're advising on other economic issues, although the Trump economic agenda is atrocious as well. But there are companies that should hear from us. You know, there was a really strong collaborative effort to have the CEO of Uber step down but from that council. But there are 18 other CEOs on that council of consumer organizations, by the way, right? This is the PepsiCos and the Disney. So every time, you know, you watch Star Wars, which is owned by Disney, there's a tacit endorsement there. Who knew you'd have to boycott Star Wars? But you don't have to. You don't have to go that far. But you do need to make yourselves known because consumers matter. I mean, where you go with your dollars matters.
Hi, I'm Susan. I'm a business analyst here at Credo. And how can progressive organizations be good allies?
You know, I think, Scott, you know, you spoke quite a bit about, you know, our partnerships with other organizations and you know, we really appreciate like the examples that we are learning so much from, whether they're from the civil rights movement in the 60s, whether they're from the gay rights movement. Like, these are lessons that are essential to our progress moving forward. And so one of the things that we very much enjoy in our relationships with, whether it's the NAACP or Color of Change or, you know, National Task Force or HRC, is really learning from what they have found to be successful through their work and what they thought went very, very wrong, and taking the time to actually absorb that information and really partner on that kind of level and learn before we strike out as leaders and say, everyone come follow us. We want to learn from other movements, and we want to partner with people truly in the sense that it's an exchange, because all of us are, we feel equally invested in these issues, just like we care intensely about Black Lives Matter and what happened in Ferguson and all of these other issues we've worked on as Muslim advocates throughout the years. We know that our partner organizations care equally about what's happening to the Muslim community right now and the targeting. And so we like to collaborate in the true sense of the word and like learn from our partners and work with them together to accomplish what it is that we set out to do. And so I would say, just, you know, very quickly, like what people have done for us is their support is what Scott talked about, that people approach us and offer, you know, not just, hey, we want to support you, but also here are ideas about things that we want to do, because there are people who have led in these fields longer than our 11-year history, and we're very eager to learn from their experience. And so we're looking for true partnerships with our allies, and we're looking for them to continue to speak out about these issues any opportunity we get. Like, we think of it as a zero tolerance policy, and that's something that, you know, we'll continue to talk about, you know, with our friends about, you know, what we hope anyone is doing, you know, in this environment, which is zero tolerance. So,
you know, we're young and hungry, and I know it doesn't feel that way if you've been in this organization for a long time, but we're small. You know, our staffing, and we're doing what we can, but we are always drinking out of a fire hose. And the capacity that progressive organizations can bring, the ones that we've talked about, is massive. And true partnership, like what Naheed is talking about, is one of the most important currencies that we could ever have as an organization, because there's just not that many of us, you know. But if we work together, the possibilities are endless.
Hi, I'm Nina, product manager here at Credo, and I would like to know if there is any legislation in Congress that progressives should organize around to fight against Trump administration's Muslim ban.
yes. So one wonderful thing that's happened since the inauguration is the level of energy in both the Senate and the House to fight against these initiatives. So Congressman Beyer has a bill right now that's been co-sponsored by over 100 other members to basically say that it's illegal to, stop people based on, it's addressing the Muslim ban, but like to stop people based on religion, ethnicity, and that type of thing. Our Senator Feinstein from here has basically introduced a bill rescinding the ban, and that has many co-sponsors. And Senator Harris, another California senator, has introduced a bill, requiring access to counsel when you're at a border, regardless of your situation, that you should have the ability to get legal advice, because as Scott mentioned, so many people are being pressured into, signing off, giving up, their rights and returning home, and other horrible detention situations where they're not even allowed to ask for advice or help or call anyone. And so we are very excited about these bills. We know it's a tough environment in which to move bills forward, but we think it's really, really important that you see people taking a stand. Like, if someone hasn't co-sponsored one of these bills, you should be asking them why. And so we're going through the lists as an organization, along with many of our allies, to see which members of Congress have put their name, because that's essentially, taking a stand against what's happening, is by either you think this is right, this executive order is appropriate or not, and it's not enough for you to just issue some tepid kind of public statement through a press release. Like, you need to put your money where your mouth is, and that means co-sponsoring some of this legislation. So if I had, one idea for folks, it would be, look at your members of Congress and think about those 3 bills, and look and check and see, like, is your member of Congress a co-sponsor on one of these bills? And if they keep telling you, or they present themselves to be active on these issues or against the ban, what have they done to put their money where their mouth is?
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I'm in the marketing department here at Credo. To follow up on that question, what should Democratic leaders in particular in Washington and in other states be doing to push back against Trump's anti-Muslim agenda and to stand up for Muslims?
That's a great question. All these questions are wonderful. We've been very, very happy to see, a lot of the Democratic leadership take a very strong stand against the ban, against a registry, against other things that are happening, because I know a lot of us are very focused on the ban right now, and certainly we are expending a tremendous amount of time and energy and resources on that. But there are other issues, that relate to the Muslim community, whether it's about, hate crimes and the fact that they're starting to talk about, taking away a tremendous amount of funding from the Civil Rights Division, the primary federal prosecutor of hate crimes. When you see a year in which, in 2015, I think Scott alluded to this in his slides, hate crimes against Muslims during the year 2015, according to FBI statistics that came out the following year, last year, went up 67%. That's crazy. I mean, I'm afraid to see what the 2016 statistics are. And we've been keeping track on our website. There's a map, and you can actually click on each pinprick to see, what the attack was, and these are serious things. These are not, we don't have the capacity. It's very tough, because unfortunately something's happening every day, to keep track of harassment. So what we're keeping track of is like violence, and the examples of things we're looking at is like, how many of you knew that there were 2 fire bombings in mosques in the last year, and they were both in California? So when people talk about, no, this is just happening, in Oklahoma or here or there, that's not true. It's happening everywhere. And so, unfortunately, the map has tracked murders and firebombings of mosques and assaults and shootings and other things like that. And so it's shocking, like, even when you talk to senators and their staff or congressional staff generally, they don't know the big picture. They see, like, oh, we heard about this here, we heard about that here, but it all appears to be in isolation. And so we're very focused at doing a better job of showing people what the big picture is. So one thing we've done is this map on our website that, I invite all of you to take a look at. And I wish it was more comprehensive than it was, but we're even having a difficult time keeping track of all the incidents because there are so many.
And, I'm glad you asked this question, because at the local level too, there are some really encouraging things happening. And we talk about the federal level a lot, and we should. But, Columbus, Ohio passed, they started a legal defense fund for immigrants and Muslims, right? Helena, Montana passed a resolution saying that refugees and Muslims are okay with us. Right? And this isn't on the coast. These are in cities across the country. But, and this also speaks to the question of how can non-Muslims help. Sometimes non-Muslims need to be the voice because there's just not enough folks to go around. And sometimes you have really, really sensitive legislators who don't want their jurisdictions to be outposts of hate in this country. And they want to take proactive steps. And so that's happening. There's so many encouraging things happening across the country in the local space as well. And it's really easy to overlook them. And don't. Be a part of it. And maybe start it yourself. Because there's a lot of Bloomington, Indianas, and Columbus, Ohio's, and Helena, Montana's in this country that need to be welcoming spaces for everybody.
All right, I get to do the fun part. So there's nothing fun for me anymore about calling the phone company or the electric company or the gas company about my bill. But I distinctly remember when I was in my very early 20s making a switch from, it was probably one of the bells, to working assets long distance on my home phone. And so it's been a very long time that I have been really grateful to fund progressive organizations using my phone bill. And I've never gotten to present a check before. So everyone in the room knows this, but for the Facebook watchers, every month Credo makes a donation to 3 progressive nonprofit organizations that are fighting to push back on Trump and promote progressive values. So Muslim Advocates was a donation recipient in December, and so now I get to hand them this really big
Thank you so much.
check.
Thank you.
And then I think we're going to sign off from Facebook. So thanks everybody for watching.
Thanks all.